This is the story about a woman whose body was destroyed. Lucky for us, she discovered that at the point where you think you can't go on, you always can. Today's story is called After You Lose Everything.
Season 4 of the story features 8 veteran trailblazers whose sacrifices and service changed the world. The story is brought to you exclusively by Salesforce, the world's #1 customer relationship management platform. More than 150,000 businesses are using Salesforce to blaze their own trails to success. You can learn more by clicking the link in our show notes. And now, on to the story.
The Marine helicopter banked to the left. The aerial door gunner held on and leaned with it. The 21-year-old sergeant was used to it by now. This was her first deployment in Afghanistan. Their team had completed their first mission of the day, and now they were heading to provide support for Marines pinned down by enemy fire. But something felt wrong. The helicopter continued to bank to the left, and the pilot wasn't correcting. She glanced into the cockpit and saw a flurry of activity. She felt her stomach rise to her throat. The sharp left bank didn't stop, and the ground raced up to meet them. The mountains of Afghanistan filled her vision, and her last thought was, "This is it." Her next memories were filled with pain and haze. In between white-hot flashes of pain, she struggled to open her eyes and stop the nightmare. When she finally could open them, she saw a hospital room. It wasn't a nightmare. It was reality. The hospital staff explained the details of what had happened. Their helicopter had malfunctioned, and after the crash, it was a miracle that she survived. Her thoughts were slippery as she tried to focus. Her head throbbed, her face burned, and her back felt like nails were stuck in it. She couldn't feel anything from her waist down. She had suffered a traumatic brain injury. Her face was covered in lacerations. A spinal cord injury left her immobilized, and her left leg had been crushed. The doctors had managed to save it, but they weren't sure if they would be able to preserve it forever. She was shipped to another hospital in California. More nightmares followed, more painkillers, operations, plastic surgery to try and reconstruct her face. It was hell, and the recovery period was just as bad. Veterans who have been wounded like this call the 1-year anniversary of their event their Alive Day. On her Alive Day, the young woman thought back on her life, what she had and what she'd lost. She had grown up as the daughter of 2 Marines. Being a Marine was all she had ever wanted to do. But now, her life was over. Her body was destroyed, and she couldn't recognize herself when she looked in the mirror. It was her Alive Day, but she didn't feel alive. Her world was dark. The thought returned again and again. Why go on? So she tried to take her own life. But when she woke up, she was still breathing. After her failed suicide attempt, tears filled her father's eyes as he spoke to his daughter. The enemy couldn't kill you. Why would you try to do it to yourself? You're tougher than that. Her father's words hit home, and hope started to return to her world. She realized that she had made it home when a lot of her sisters and brothers in arms hadn't. Many had it much worse, and some had given up. Those thoughts prompted her to think about what she could do with the rest of her life. One day, while lying in her hospital bed, a rep from an organization called Disabled Sports USA knocked on her door. "Yes," she said. "Do you want to get out of here?" asked the rep. Of course she did, she thought. But it turned out, like everything, there was a catch. She was going to have to learn a winter sport if she wanted to leave. She said yes and jumped at the chance. The rep for Disabled USA had heard that she used to snowboard. She had, but didn't know in her current state if she could ever attempt it again. Soon she was sneaking away from the hospital and giving it a try. That try turned into snowboarding 1 day a week. Next, she added swimming, rowing, and outdoor cycling to her weekly routine. She felt the power returning to her body, and her spirits surged. While she was training, the 2018 Winter Paralympics got on her radar. She was going to go for it. During the same time, the doctors couldn't figure out how to save her leg. The bad news had turned worse, and after 3 years and 36 surgeries, they had to amputate her leg below the knee. It was hard, and she consoled herself with the thought, "At least I still do have my knee. I can still do a lot." But only 1 month after that, she developed a post-surgery infection. The doctors were going to have to remove her left knee. A rage filled her, and she screamed at the doctors. Her dream to be a Marine was crushed, and now her dream to be a Paralympian was going with it. Her rage was justified. Below-the-knee amputees have a much easier time than above-the-knee amputees. Above-the-knee amputees have to relearn everything. She felt like a toddler, learning the basics of walking, turning, climbing the stairs, sitting. She fell far more than a toddler did. It wasn't easy. But now her mind was focused. Defeat and dishonor were not options. She adopted 2 mantras, and on the days she felt like giving up, she repeated them to herself. Stop worrying about what you've lost. Look at what you've got. And the other, what counts is what's behind your ribcage and the 6 inches between your ears. Those mantras, her family, and her friends helped save her. She turned back to sports. Despite those setbacks, she went on to win in snowboarding at the USA Snowboard and Freeski National Championship. And then she placed 5th in the world competition. She would compete in rowing, swimming, and outdoor cycling at the 2016 Invictus Games. And she didn't stop there. She took up mountain climbing and has now summited Mount Kilimanjaro and Karstens Pyramid in Indonesia. Now, everything is different for the better. She says, "When I'm having a bad day, I help someone who's missing 3 limbs. There's this common misconception about what strength is. In the grand scheme of things, we're in this together. You have to realize that you have to turn to somebody." On one of those difficult days, a fellow wounded veteran said to her, "You inspired me to walk another 10 steps." The woman then asked for her autograph. With tears in her eyes, the young sergeant obliged and signed her name, Kirstie Ennis. To keep going after your body is destroyed is no easy task, but each of us has a reality to face. An easy life isn't promised. Death and aging are realities for all of us, at least for now. And Kirstie's story is about persevering, learning, and growing to find new limits to what her body is capable of. And through that pursuit, she inspires others on their own journeys. So no matter where you're at, you can dwell on what you've lost. You can focus on what you don't have. You can keep a mindset of coulda, shoulda, or woulda. Or you can develop a mindset like Kirstie of I can, I will, and I must. When your days get dark, try following Kirstie's lead. Try helping someone else. Others around us are fighting battles that we don't know anything about. When we reach out for help, we often find someone who wants to help us back, and a virtuous cycle of hope, faith, and progress begins again. So even after you lose everything, remember that you still can accomplish anything. That's her story. What's yours going to be?
Thanks for listening to The Story. If you love this and want more, tap subscribe to make sure you don't ever miss an episode. The Story is brought to you exclusively by Salesforce, the world's #1 customer relationship management platform. More than 150,000 businesses are using Salesforce to blaze their own trails to success. The Story is created by The Mission, a veteran-owned media company and podcast network. We create custom branded podcasts for world-class companies like Salesforce, Twilio, and Katera. To learn more, head over to themission.co and subscribe to our daily newsletter.